morning, everyone, and welcome back to Grindhouse, where we drink coffee and talk about movies. I'm Leah Diana, and today with my boyfriend and co-host, Shawn Tetrault, we will be winding back the reels to 1937. During World War I, a German spy and a French spy meet and fall in love in Dark Journey. Let's get into it.
71, 83, 91.
Clever girl, that. Probably our best worker. But I'm responsible to headquarters.
And I'm responsible to my partners in Paris, who are risking their lives and mine.
I hate to suspect her. A lot of German friends.
You won't come out with me?
I won't tell you anything else.
All right, Madeline. I lose.
No, Carl. You win.
Find out who's the head of Section 8.
I can't face it, I can't. After 3 years of misery, to pretend, to cheat, to lie.
I know your name isn't Godard, but Mondini. And I know that you have outwitted us for 3 years.
I found out who's the head of Section 8.
Who?
You can't do this.
Certainly not.
I'll be waiting.
Spread the word, you dirty cocksuckers. Tell all your grave robbing friends I want them out of the city now!
The nightmare of insane murder. From the depths of hell. From the angel of death. Only at the Grindhouse.
So, Shwayne Connery. We're continuing with the new names.
Jesus Christ.
I saw a TikTok yesterday that said that all Shawns are lying about their full name. Is it true your full name is Parmesan?
No.
That would have been cool, though.
Get off of TikTok.
No! So we are going to get off of modern technology and go back 86 years to 1937. Guess our travel capsule that we're going back in time with sounds like a distraught cat at the moment. So, Shawn, how did you like the quality of today's movie?
This was an absolutely dirty ass film transfer. This one, it's a very old black and white movie. So it looked like it was transferred to VHS off of a very beat up film negative. There was a lot of dirt, dust, scratches throughout the whole film. It was very hazy. So like it looks like it was just not well kept or had been played many, many times, possibly in the old theaters somewhere.
And what makes me laugh is 2 years later, we have Gone with the Wind in 1939, which the transfer I have on Blu-ray is absolutely fucking phenomenal. Like, that movie was filmed, like, there are so many facts about that film that I know. It took it took like 2 or 3 years to film this movie. You know, she was doing other films while doing Gone with the Wind, and I believe this was before that journey. But I chose this movie because I am in love with old Hollywood. I love Vivian Lee. And I think Vivian Lee was one of the greatest actresses of her time. And we only had her for a short time. She died at 53 from tuberculosis, which is shocking to us now. But back in the 50s, or 60s, really not that shocking if she developed it, in the mid 40s when tuberculosis, they were just trying to figure out how to solve that issue. So, before we get deep into this lovely old movie, I would like to talk about our sponsor of today's episode, which is... Can you guess what's in these boxes? All 4 of these boxes. Shawn, what do you think is in these boxes?
So much fucking tea.
So much tea. So, the holidays are now well over. But we recorded these, it's still January. So, I took advantage of a huge sale. What I have in front of me is fall faves, winter classics, and fresh and fruity. Now, the best of 2021 we already had. And some of the ones that are in these teas, I'm just going to go over and I'm going to ask you how you feel about them. So, pumpkin chai. This tea has been in the house for months.
Yeah, this one's kind of a staple. We generally always have it because I think it's one of your favorite ones.
It is one of my favorite ones. I was never really big into chai because chai is a warmer kind of tea. A lot of warm spices. And today, Shawn is drinking you're drinking cardamom French toast, which cardamom is a warming spice, which is present in some of these teas. Another one of the teas is the Reishi Relax. While I had COVID, drank this one a bit. I'm out of my Reishi Relax, and I'm also out of one of my cold 911s. I have now fallen in love with anything blueberry tea. I'm not even fucking kidding. All of these blueberry teas, there's organic blueberry jam and blueberry fields forever. A little bit of vanilla, the skinny vanilla syrup, just a little pump, and it is fucking magical. I have started almost every morning with this fucking tea, and I love it.
What are you going to do when we run out?
Buy more. These are actually the little sample boxes, as you can hear. There's 12 tins of loose leaf tea and infusions, and each one on the back has a description, tells you the caffeine level, if you can make it hot or cold. Some of the fruity teas actually recommend that you make them cold. Tells you how much to measure, how long to steep it, and if it's good with additives and stuff, such as their own agave syrup, which I purchased, which is very good, very lovely. And as someone who's a diabetic, you don't always want to use straight sugar. It can mess with your system. So I enjoy using the skinny syrups, the agave, the honey. It's perfect. How do you like your cardamom French toast?
I mean, I haven't really been able to sip it too much yet because it's still scalding fucking hot. But it has a really nice scent to it.
They do.
Yeah, I think it needs to steep a little longer, but I think it's a nice tea.
Yep, and it says here that we brewed it at 200 degrees, and it needs 3 to 5 minutes. And I believe it's only been about 4 minutes since we did. So I can't recommend these teas enough. Some of my other favorites include the baked apple chai, maple syrup oolong, the Buddha blend, which was the first tea I ever purchased from David's Tea. And let me tell you, Buddha blend is incredible. It is a mix between white and green tea. It has peach flavoring and white hibiscus blossoms. And I am obsessed with hibiscus. I always have been. It's a nice, good white pick-me-up tea. It's medium caffeinated, so you won't really have a lot of the jitters if you drink it during the day. Now, don't get me wrong. This is a podcast where we drink a lot of coffee. We do. But sometimes you just need a warm cup of tea, especially when we're in the winter months. And living in New England, we can fluctuate anywhere between 60 degrees to negative 20 here. You wake up and, flip a coin and go, what kind of weather are we going to have today? So it's nice to have a really warm cup of tea, whether you're staying in or you've got to go brave the elements and go to work. Definitely look in our description of the show notes to sign up for the tea subscription. I have not yet, but that's because I'm using these to build my obsessions. And let me tell you, it's 6 deep and I'm almost ready to get that subscription. So, I picked this film because of Vivian Lee. But I also picked this film because I didn't look at the back of the box. I didn't look at the synopsis. I didn't look at the synopsis, and I saw Dark Journey, and I went, ooh, Vivian Lee, movie called Dark Journey. This might be intriguing. It's the 1930s. What was I expecting? Was I expecting a horror movie?
I'm honestly not sure. Just based on what I'd seen, the back of the box and whatnot, it didn't seem like it was going to speak to me personally. And surprise, surprise, it didn't.
It didn't. Poor Shawn looked absolutely bored during this movie, and I felt bad, but you gotta understand that this is a film, and I'll go into the explanation on the box. This is a film that you probably would see in some grindhouses because it's old, kind of the subject matter. It's about espionage, spies, but it also shows you the beginning of old Hollywood, the beginning of film era, in my opinion.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, like, this, at least this version of the movie that we have, there's a lot of dust, a lot of green, a lot of fading to the film itself before it was put onto VHS or DVD or anything. So to me, it ended up looking a lot more like it was a silent film, even though it wasn't.
And moments and times where scenes would jump and how they would be filmed really made me feel like it should have been a silent movie. But silent movies, this movie is only like, 10 years after the silent movie era?
Yeah.
So it was one of those movies that, yeah, this wouldn't keep audiences now, but if you really do like old films, if you like black and white, if you like old Hollywood, check this out. And we actually have this in a double feature. This is called Legendary Hollywood Stars. It's a double feature, and it says Vivian Leigh on the cover. It is Dark Journey and Fires Over England. We did not watch Fires Over England because it's an older, like, almost Elizabethan movie, and I was like, no, I'd rather do the World War I. So I'm going to read the back of the cover. It says, double feature Vivian Leigh. Vivian Leigh, one of the world's most distinguished actresses, an Academy Award winner for her immortal role as Scarlet in Gone with the Wind. Is featured here in two of her earlier films. So these are pre-Gone with the Wind. Dark Journey. The setting is Stockholm during World War I. Vivian Leigh plays a French double agent spy masquerading as a traitor. She soon becomes involved and falls in love with her German spy contact, Vedit. An engrossing story of spy-crossed lovers, young Vivian Leigh is radiant. This was filmed in black and white, 1937. It's 80 minutes, but this was released by Eddie Entertainment in 1994. So this is definitely an old one, and I just noticed her name is completely faded from the top of the box.
Yeah.
So somebody actually had this, like, this part was in the sun.
Yeah, it was in direct sunlight wherever it was kept, whether it be a video store or possibly in somebody's house.
Yeah. But the tapes look really good. These look like they were barely played.
And likely they weren't.
Yeah, and even this box, while there's a sticky part here, this is where I think the Goodwill sticker was. But,
yeah.
This box is in really good condition as well. It's really nice to see people take care of these films because, and something tragic about antiquing or finding films like this is this was in someone's home, this was loved, this was cared for, and probably a loved one passed away of old age, and this is how we acquire these. So antiquing has its ups, and you also have to think, when you see that lovely little old lady sticker on there that says her name and her address in case, the movie ever gets lost, and then you're like, I found her obituary, that's why I have it. So it sucks, but it is what it is at this point in life. So let me get into a little bit of facts on this.
Well, before we start the facts, we should just go over the basic info of this movie.
All right, you want to take the basics?
Yeah, so this is, as we said, we watched Dark Journey. It's a 1937 British spy film directed by Victor Saville. It stars Conrad Veidt and Vivian Leigh. This one was written by Arthur Wimperis, I think is how you say his last name. It originally came out March 28th, 1937. I don't have any kind of budget or box office numbers for this because records on that stuff weren't really kept back then. But this was shot at Denham Studios, which all the sets and everything were designed by Andre Andrejeu, who I believe was one of the more prominent set designers at that time. I mean, there weren't many. Most of the people came off of theater set design, so like you'd have those people transitioning to much bigger types of set design with film.
And I'm kind of looking at this, like, thinking this was an espionage movie about World War One, and then, what, like 8 years later, World War II would start. So this is definitely one of those, like, movies shot about that first war, like, stuck in the middle of, like, the turmoil of everything happening between the world wars, which I don't know much about World War One and World War II. I'm more of a Civil War buff. But, you know, people that I know that are huge World War One and World War II buffs love these espionage movies. They love looking into, like, the double agent kind of thing. It gives you a glimpse
behind the curtain, like at some of the stuff that was going on back then that most average people didn't get to see.
No, you wouldn't think that, you know, a successful businesswoman would be working for the Germans and at the same time giving that information to the French. Like, that's unheard of. This movie was set in 1913, I believe my notes say that I found. 1918. This film was set in 1918, which means women really didn't have a lot to do with the troubles and tribulations of war and men.
Yeah, and I actually took note of some of that throughout this movie.
I figured you would pay attention to that.
Because I think coming off of China Syndrome, where we noticed heavily the sexism in that movie, and how even that was in what, the 70s, 79, and the sexism was very prominent. Like,
very prominent.
Very in your face. It still existed. So you take that back to the 30s, you said?
Yeah, 30s.
Or actually, 1918 is when it takes place.
Yeah, where it was set in 1918, yeah.
But something I made note of was the fact that throughout this movie, there's almost a role reversal between Vivian Leigh's character and
Vedette's character.
Yeah, Conrad Veidt, I assume.
Yeah, Conrad Veidt.
So I noticed it most prominently in the dinner scene, which is kind of late into the movie. But there's this moment where the way she's talking and carrying herself feels very, almost like she's in the position of the masculine role at that point. And the way he's speaking is very, like, he's worried about her. He even calls himself a coward. Like, he's very reserved and meek and quiet.
I think that's because of all the hiding they had to do.
It is, but it also comes across as like, so when you go into a black and white movie, generally you expect to see the male be like stern, rigid, collected, while the woman is more doting. She's quieter. She's like, she'd be the one to say, I worry about you. But here the roles are reversed. And I thought that was very interesting for a movie of this time to have her take on that switch in personality.
I think that's why Vivian Leigh is so adored as an actress. She was notorious for being very difficult to work with, but she also gave a hell of a performance. Do you remember any of the characters besides hers in this film?
Mostly just her and the guy.
Yeah, and even Conrad Vedette, I was like, he's okay, he's all right. I would have liked somebody different in this position, but he was an actual German actor. One of the fun facts I found out is everyone in this film has a predominant British accent. They're all British. He is the only German actor in this film, which makes it difficult for you to realize that she's French playing a Swede. Or, you know, her shopkeepers are a French woman and a German woman, and her butler or her servant, I don't know what he was. She said servant and butler too. He was supposedly a Swedish man who hated Germans, but in the end ended up being a German spy, which was like, that was a heck of a twist. That was like, ooh, look, a little twist.
Yeah, I wasn't really expecting it, honestly.
But it made you realize, like, oh shit. Like, you couldn't trust anybody back then. What I found remarkable is I've watched Gone with the Wind several times. I've seen A Streetcar Named Desire. But Vivian always has this one look she does where she stands there, fucking resting bitch face with one of her eyebrows going, and it's her, like, stern kind of look. It's famous for a party scene in Gone with the Wind. But I noticed she did it in this when her and Conrad were telling each other, like, I know who you are, and I know who you are. And they didn't care in that moment. In that moment, they just wanted to be two lovers whisked away. Which I was like, this has, like, heavy, and I said it when we paused the movie at one point, I was like, this has got real heavy, like, Casablanca feeling, but it's not as great. This is, like, definitely a movie that could have taken, oh, well, do you remember Dark Journey? Like, that's kind of what the story is supposed to be like when the actors were being explained, how do I portray these characters for Casablanca? Which... sorry, the Rona still got me a little. Which it's really, really fascinating to see the journey of all of these actors and actresses. This movie is also 86 years old. Yeah. 80 fucking 6 years old. That's ridiculous. That this is where we were almost 90 years ago. And now, you know, what's the biggest movie that was released with all the bells and whistles? Avatar, The Way of the Water. I think that's what it's called. The Way of Water or The Way of the Water?
Yeah. Honestly, like... And
right now, that's the newest technological movie I can think of.
This is going to derail us slightly, but, like, that movie came out very recently, and it had so much less of a impact than I thought it was going to. Like, just judging from, like, how big the first one was, and then this one came out, maybe because it has taken him so long to do these sequels. I think he waited too long.
I think we watched something last night for, oh god, his name's Cinemassacre? Is that who he is?
Yeah, James Rolfe.
James Rolfe. We watched him go over, like, basically why people say Avatar's overrated. And I am one of those people who said years ago, Avatar's overrated. But I understand why I said it, and I also understand why I need to give it a second shot. I saw Avatar in theaters with my friends. I loved Avatar when it came out, but the hype behind it is almost suffers from a Frozen-like movie. Yeah,
I agree. The hype... So, depending on where you're standing in this landscape of movies, so for me, the hype is warranted only because of the technological achievements he made to get that movie done.
Correct.
Like, he had to invent new 3D technology in order to get what he wanted out of it. Not to mention his dedication to fully building out the world of Pandora.
Which I can appreciate, because some filmmakers don't do that.
Yeah. And a lot of people, like, from a filmmaking standpoint, Avatar is a fucking heavyweight.
It's phenomenal.
Not many films can stand up to it. But I do think some people blow it out of the water a little too much because it's it's not the most original story. We've seen it many times before, but...
What did my friend and I used to call it? Pocahontas in space.
Basically,
but he compared it to a shit ton of films. Fern Gully.
Dances with Wolves.
I mean, yeah, but what movie nowadays is 100% original?
There's very few.
There's very, very few. You talk to a filmmaker nowadays and they'll tell you, well, I got inspiration from Carpenter or Lynch or, Kubrick, or, I got inspiration from cartoons from my childhood. You have to build off of inspirations from anywhere. I've honestly 100% can say there is no film that I know that is 100% original. I would say movies that come close is Jaws. Comes pretty close to being original. Night of the Living Dead. That comes very close to being very original. You know, Friday the 13th comes pretty close.
Friday the 13th came out only because of Halloween.
Yep.
So it's even that.
James says that.
Original.
James says that, you know, Friday the 13th drew from Halloween. Nightmare on Elm Street drew from, you know, other things. And it's remarkable that watching these older films, and this is why I appreciate older films, no matter how kind of blasé, and honestly, this movie was blasé and boring, but I couldn't look away because the impact that these old movies have on what they do today, like that double espionage. Like, you can't tell me that Casablanca didn't draw from this, and that, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith didn't draw from Casablanca. That was the first spy movie I could think of right now. That's a little bit of a stretch.
Example.
But like espionage movies like Mission Impossible, they drew from somewhere, something. You know, the Kingsman, that drew from something. These are remarkable fucking films. And even shitty films like Tommy Wiseau's The Room, he had to have drawn from other stories.
Guaranteed.
And you know, I hate to fucking mention this goddamn man's name. I hate it. He's not allowed in this house. But Neil Breen had to have drawn his inspiration from other movies too. He's not allowed in the house.
Yeah,
the only way you can watch Neil Breen is if Red Letter Media reviews him.
Neil Breen is a fucking enigma. Like, I don't understand that man. Never will.
Let me tell you, if you want to check out Neil Breen's movies, be ready to drop $150 to $200 on a bootleg copy of his DVD that he sells online.
Yeah, because he sells them himself and
he
charges insane amounts for them.
Because they're the greatest works.
According to him.
So let's actually talk about a great work. So honestly, the way this plot goes, it's extremely fucking quick. Lately, we've been saying these plots are very quick, but this one's very quick. So I'm going to go over kind of a basic synopsis of this one. Let's see. So in the spring of 1918, a German U-boat stops a Dutch freighter. And on this freighter is our star, Vivian Lee, who her name is Madeline. Madeline owns a dress shop in Sweden. She is stopped and asked, you know, why have you been traveling 6, 7, 8 times across the channel? I own a dress shop. I go to Paris to pick up the local fashions. I can't bring them back on a train, so I bring them back this way. Okay, that's fine. But they said that they're kind of paying attention to her at that point. She gets back to the dress shop, unloads her cargo, picks up a few things, tells her butler, we're going to travel to Madame So-and-so's house to give her the latest fashions. Once they get there, she's ushered upstairs into a room with 3 gentlemen. Doors are locked. The dress is draped over a lamp that has a map on it. And she reads out numbers and Morse code written in the lace of the dress.
I have to say, like, this little reveal moment, I definitely didn't expect that.
I didn't either. I'm like, how is a woman going to be a spy? I'm like, damn.
I thought it was a really interesting way to transport information. I'd never seen anything like that before.
Yep. Which means some of these dresses or these robes, she sells garments, robes, it said, that once she's done with them, she sells them. And that means the women of Sweden, these upper crust women, are wearing spy plans that are woven into their garments. That's fucking cool. Tell me who's done that lately.
Nobody I can think of. Nobody I can think of.
Right? So after that, kind of goes through the motions of her, you know, being at the boutique, selling her garments, you know, whatnot. Then we're introduced to, what was his full name? Baron von Marowitz, who is believed to be a German deserter. He enters Sweden. He gets interrogated by a man checking his passport, and he was like, oh, you know, you don't have the means to stay here. You know, we don't want you in our country. He goes, oh, read this piece of paper. This is, you know, the proof that I have the money to keep myself here. This man reads this paper, looks frightened, and says, Sweden welcomes you. You may stay as long as you like. And we're all like, suspicious. So we kind of go through the motions. We see Madeline, you know, go to parties, go to dinner with friends. Von Marowitz and her kind of meet and, you know, have a run-in where she inadvertently gives away a secret of how he gets all the women at parties. I kind of tried. Did you try to understand this little parlor trick?
I didn't really.
I don't think you paid attention to this. So what he would do is he would write down how each woman of a nationality would react after being kissed. And he'd keep the little note in his pocket on a piece of paper. So he'd be like, oh, where are you from? Well, I'm from France. Well, French women react a certain way. So he's like, I know exactly what you're going to say after I kiss you. Oh, really? Well, he kisses her and she reacts that way. Do another girl. So he does a Swedish girl. And then he does a Brazilian woman. And the Brazilian woman is like, how did you do that? And she's smitten with him. All the things women would fall in love with in the early 20th century. Jesus Christ, ladies. But then while that Brazilian woman was getting a drink, she overhears Madeline say, oh, I know that parlor trick. You write down what women say and you keep it in your pocket. That way you can go, oh, this is how Brazilian women react. And he has what they would react to. So she calls him out and he's intrigued with the fact that Madeline is so brazen and would be like, oh, she's, for lack of a better word, she's ballsy. And he kind of is very intrigued and smitten. So the two of them start kind of a little bit of a romance together. Meanwhile, in the background, Madeline is, traveling to get more information for the Germans, to where the French are going to be and try to ambush them. Unfortunately, she gives the Germans bad information, and the French were waiting for them later. They intercepted a sort of fight, but the French were there later and then caught them, and all those people were caught. So Madeline is questioned, immediately going, you need to go back to France and you need to find out with your contacts what happened. So this was hard to understand, that whole scene. But it seems like before she got whisked away, they had that big dinner where she was pretty much absolutely fallen in love, and he did too. Where, did you notice he proposed marriage to her?
No.
Yes, he proposed like, I would like to marry you, basically. It was harder weaving into the story the way it was because you saw her have kind of like a little tantrum, like, how many other women do you love? And she walked away. But that was kind of women's way of grabbing men's attention. Like, if I sit here and accuse you and start a fight, you're going to do everything in your power to bring me back. I think women still try to use this trick nowadays, but as Shawn rolls his eyes, that's not how it works anymore, ladies. Just be completely honest. You had to play the game back then. You didn't know who people were. During this dinner, unfortunately, before all this happens, her butler is murdered, is killed. And she goes to identify him and finds out that he was a German spy, even though he hated Germans, which means he was doing a pretty good job, but somebody caught him.
Yeah.
She was like, I didn't know. And which surprises her because she is a German spy. Like, she didn't know he was a German spy at all. She was like, no, I didn't know this.
Kept his cover even from her.
Very, very well. So while that happens, then there's the whole bit about, she gave bad information. She needs to go back to France to converse with her French spies and find out what happened, why we got bad information. So all the while, before she leaves, Baron von Marwitz confronts her and is like, I know who you truly are. And basically she says, well, I know who you truly are. You're the leader of the German intelligence. And he's like, and you are a German spy masquerading, but you are really a French spy. And then comes the dullest kiss I have ever seen.
Yeah, so I personally love how unconvincing kisses could be in older films.
It was literally, if you take your lips and somebody else's lips and just go,
just press
rub,
them together.
You just gracefully just raise. I was like, damn.
But I think I have a theory as to why they are this dull. Like, sometimes, you have to remember, this is the early days of film.
Very early.
So most actors and actresses are coming from the stage and transitioning into film.
True.
So my theory here, because a lot of the notes I took down were about the filmmaking and like the acting, things like that. The performances throughout this film they're very stage-like.
Yeah.
So everybody feels like they're performing on a stage rather than in front of a camera. Even the camera angles, like everything's shot wider, flat, as if you were placing a camera to look at a stage. Like that's kind of how it feels for most of the time. And I think that this, like, coming from the stage type of performing on a stage, you don't actually have to kiss because you can't tell.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you can literally just press your faces together and people are going to assume what's happening because they're far enough away. Bringing that into film, I think eventually they realized it doesn't look realistic on camera. It looks great in a theater, but on camera you need to get a little dirtier.
Hey, you must be on top of each other for us to be convinced you're in love. It was one of those things where I was like, I wanted it to be like this passionate kiss because I'm so used to old Hollywood passion kisses, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is still really young Hollywood.
Honestly, even some of the more famous old Hollywood kisses aren't real.
No.
Like, you remember them as being real, but then when you see them now, it's like, that they're not actually kissing.
Now I'm going to look at old movies, and now I'm going to scrutinize them by their kisses. Did you kiss properly? No, you need to be on top of her.
Did you use tongue?
If you're not using tongue, it's not convincing.
Did you lick her tonsils?
Did you check for cavities? Sorry, did your head come out the other side of her back end? It's not a kiss. That's real dirty. So she goes to France, and there's this whole, it's really cool how you see the fact that everybody who's like, you're under arrest, like, it was all a ploy to get her back to the president or whoever the leader of the French kind of spy network or whatever it was, and give her the highest Medal of Honor in France for what she's done, because she caused a major turn of events in the war, which was kind of incredible, but I don't know enough of World War I to kind of piece what she was part of. All I know is they did a hell of a job, and she did a hell of a job keeping her cool to get to that point, because they were really laying on her at one point. So she gets back to Stockholm, and that's when the meeting with von Marowitz happens, where they reveal who each other is, and they plan their future in the foothills of France at this little lake in the mountains. And she says something that really moved me, where she was like, he says, we'll always be caught, we'll always be found. And she was like, well, that means the dream is really over. Like, in that very moment, in those 10 minutes of them kissing and feeling passionate, they felt like they could be real people in love. But they realized that they both work for either side. And once they leave this room, whoever gives the information to the top first wins. So basically, once she leaves this room, it is an ensuing kind of battle where she runs to her, I don't know if it's a co-conspirator or it's her connection. His name is Robert or Bob. Pretty much says, I'm in trouble. Von Marowitz is the leader, which they were like, oh, okay, well, let's get him. But like, no, he knew exactly who I was, so I'm in trouble. So they fill out a plan of how to get her out of there. Von Marowitz and the German army put a sign on her shop that says special sale, so it flocks hundreds of people into her store to where the Germans can get her out of there quietly without a scene. But the Swedish police the Swedes are so pissed at all of this. They don't take kindly to French or German spies. It doesn't matter what side you're on. They don't want you in their country. So the Swedish police show up, escort Madeline to the police station, where they pretty much find everything out. They interrogate her and say, you're being deported. We don't want you here. Like, we can't take this. No one is going to come into our country and lie about this shit. Like, I don't care what side you're on. So they deport her. And while being deported, the Germans, I guess, get to the ship first. The Swedes lock her in her stateroom till they're 3 miles away, because that's too far to swim back to mainland. So at that point, The Swedes have her locked down in the boat. The Germans try to get her out of there. The French, they're all trying to get her off of this boat. At one point, you see in the beginning of the film where they have the German U-boat stop that first Dutch freighter, and everybody goes out of their staterooms. They inspect everybody. They pull the person they're looking off. Everybody goes back to what they were doing. They did the same thing, but von Marowitz is the one who boards the ship. And von Marowitz pulls her and says, well, let's go. And they're like, but she has a Swedish passport. She is not a Swede. She is a French woman. She is a spy. She needs to come with us. Thus ensues what could have been one hell of a battle if technology was right. But it's kind of lackluster, but I understand because it's the 30s. Thus ensues a British Q ship, which is a heavily armored merchant ship concealing weaponry, approaches the U-boat that is trying to take Madeline aboard the U-boat to bring her back to Germany for containment. They sink the enemy vessel and rescue Madeline. With that, they take von Marowitz and his crew onto the British ship, where the British representatives there say, we're going to treat you guys very well. We're going to bring you back to England. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. Madeline, you're safe. But then they say, von Marowitz has to go on the other boat. We have to take him into custody. He has to go into, basically, he's a war criminal now. So now he's in captivity until the end of the war. She was like, are you going to kill him? Like, no, we don't kill our prisoners. You and I both made that face like, that's not true.
Listen here. I know you want to be painted as the good guys, but in war, every side killed prisoners at some point.
Yes. War does not equal peace. As much as people think that going to war will solve problems, I don't think war solves anything. When people go to war, lives are devastated. I mean, the last time this country went to war, it lasted, 20 years almost?
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't even, none of us really know if the war in Afghanistan or any of that is still going or not going, honestly. Like, I think, to be honest, and I think this is very polarizing for me to say as an American, I have no fucking idea what's happening. We don't get accurate news information in this country.
No, and I mean, for me personally, it doesn't help. Like, I very much distance myself from society in a lot of ways. I don't follow what's going on in the news. I don't follow, like, politics or anything like that. I honestly just keep to myself and keep myself alive. That is it. I personally like living this way. I think it's a little bit, it's kind of a blissful ignorance to some degree, but I think it helps me get through life without having to live with constant dread and anxiety about things that I can't fucking control.
Yeah. I still read the news some days. I still look up stuff. And nowadays I've gotten to the point where I read the news and I look up things and my anxiety goes through the roof. And I have to, like, take stuff with a grain of salt. Like, I'll read BBC News. That's where I go for all my information on what's happening. And I've, sadly, and I know that a lot of people will be angry, I've taken myself away from politics because it got to the point where I stress myself out so much I don't know what to do. I have undiagnosed mental issues. I know I do. And I got to take care of me. I can't worry about the world. We're too poor at this point and so low on the totem pole to really want to give a shit. And I feel like a lot of people feel like that. Like, oh great, more bad news. Like, every time I open the news, there's a mass shooting.
Oh,
and I'm
yeah.
like, I can't. I fucking can't.
Enough is enough.
Like, the one mass shooting that was close enough to us was Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook wasn't that far away. It's in Connecticut. And when it happened, I was working as Mrs. Claus on the Polar Express in Newport with little children. These kids anywhere between, like, infant to, like, 10 years old. And when that happened, I remember being on the caboose, in the back of the caboose waiting to come out, because I'd get a signal to come out as Mrs. Claus. And I was Mrs. Claus as a 20-year-old, but let me tell you, nobody else wanted to be Mrs. Claus on that train. It was devastatingly terrifying to hide the fear you have in your eyes from children. How do you explain to children that a bunch of 6-year-olds just got killed? They were doing nothing. Like, it's one of the reasons why I'm very happy we're not having kids, because I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
You know, it's gotten to the point where, oh, why aren't millennials having children? There you go. I can't afford to feed myself. I'm too sick sometimes to take care of even myself. You want me to take care of other lives? No, go see somebody else to further the population. This household will have cats.
Oh, so many cats.
2 isn't that many. But in this small space, it might be. So at the end of the film, since I've derailed, Madeline goes down to the bottom of the ship and waves towards Van Morrison, and she says, I'll be waiting, because she wants to build a life with him. She's in love with him. So it's nice that at the end of the film, Madeline will be transported back to France, or she'll go to some neutral area, or she'll be kept hidden till the war is over. And hopefully Von Marowitz survives his captivity so he can be with her again. It is a very cut and dry film, but it is a very, I think, romanticized version of what espionage could be.
Which a lot of these older films were.
Yeah. Because you're not going to show, like, the details of if Madeline was caught immediately by him, he would have had to kill her immediately.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, if he knew the woman I'm in love with is the reason why we just lost a battle,
it would be his civic duty.
It would be his duty to his country and his command to be like, my love, I need to make sure that you never, ever get word, or no one ever gets word of me. Because if he gets captured, like, that's the head of the intelligence, that's a big deal. So the fact that he sort of kind of sacrificed himself and didn't really care was a little weird, because I could have seen him immediately just shooting her and just being absolutely devastated about it, but it was his duty.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, like, from the moment that they reveal themselves to each other, it's like you kind of are teetering. You're like wondering, are they gonna turn each other in? Are they gonna run away together? Like, is one gonna betray the other? Like, it's I don't know, with these spy films, that's always a possibility. Yeah. So you're always left kind of wondering what's about to happen. And
the thing that was gut-wrenching was even Von Marowitz said, we could run, but they will always find us. Like, he thought of it. He flirted with the idea of taking her and running away, which is beautiful. It's amazing. But what country would they truly be safe in?
At that time?
At that time, nobody. I mean, even I think the Americans were starting to kind of help out in the war, and they weren't accepting war criminals at that point, which to either side, they're war criminals, you know. To the Germans, she's a war criminal. To the French, he's a war criminal, you know.
Well, because if you accept war criminals, you're basically choosing a side.
Yeah.
Can't be neutral.
No. I mean, the only truly place that's ever been neutral is Switzerland. And lately, with all of the problems with Russia going after Ukraine, Sweden took a stance for the first time, and it was shocking to hear that they were on Ukraine's side. Not because, like, no, everybody should be on Ukraine's side, but it was like, wait, the Swiss? Country neutrality? Oh boy.
They sided one way or the other?
Yeah, that's big. That's, world's gonna end, people. That's definitely a telltale. I have a few facts. So this movie was set in 1918, but the fashion was set in 1937. So that's definitely one of those things that
doesn't line up.
It doesn't line up. The fashion is about 29 years old, or 29 years newer. So some of the fashions that she's toting around would not have been present in Europe at that time.
Right.
With this movie being this old, I do not believe there is any color for this film at all.
No, I don't think so.
And I think with the transfer being so rough, I don't think there could be color.
I mean, it's possible you could go back and do like a Technicolor pass and like, which essentially create color where there is none. They've done that with a lot of movies. And
I honestly, I hate it.
Yeah, it doesn't look good.
I would love to know what color some of those dresses were. I would love to see how the lighting would have been in some of the party elements. I've always said it, but Gone with the Wind is in color, and it's in Technicolor. It's that early color. And I hate how bright and happy it is for such a heavy story.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it shouldn't be this romanticized. But back then, that's what things were. They're romanticized. And if you're thinking the 1930s, you know, the Civil War wasn't that long. It was like, what, maybe like 90 years?
Yeah.
If that. Like, now we're looking at, you know, 100 and something fucking years. And the way they portray that film and the way it happened in real life, you know, in the South, for Southerners, for that Southern plantation ideal, it did kind of look like that. But you also have to think, like, the way people were treated and how things happened, it could have been portrayed much more darker.
Yeah. And
I've heard on the wind, very, very subtly on the wind prior to 2020, that they wanted to do an updated version of Gone with the Wind.
No.
Which now, after 2020 and after, you know, all of the movement of, you know, holding people accountable, Gone with the Wind is very much a polarizing movie now, to where it shows a history of film. I appreciate the film. I appreciate the acting. I don't appreciate a lot of the subject matter now. And I see where loving this movie for everything kind of might have been wrong when I was younger. But that's where educating yourself comes in.
Yeah.
So I've taken the time to educate myself a lot as a woman of the 2020s now. And while I still love the movie for its pioneering in filmmaking and acting, and it being one of the greatest films ever created, the subject matter is not anymore. So, but it's not a movie we're going to cover on this podcast. I've already made it clear, because of the fact that this movie is one of the most famous movies. It would never have been in a grindhouse. And two, it's fucking Titanic length.
It's
two fucking tapes, guys.
Long fucking movie.
It is a very long movie, and when every Thanksgiving it would be on, and it would always be on. I think it was Turner Classic Movie would just run the movie the whole weekend or the whole time. I would watch every second of it because I loved it. It's one of my favorite films. But it's also a film where, well, in a 12-hour period, you can only watch the film maybe like 5 or 6 times, where I could put on Red Letter Media and let that fucking run for ages and listen to them bitch about really bad movies. I'd rather do that. So, do you have any final thoughts on this film there, Shawn? I know you had a lot of notes on the filming part of it.
Well, so, like I said, like I don't have a ton more notes. Like, most of the stuff I wrote down were just about the filmmaking itself. This is a movie that I think, given when it was made and the time period that it's made about, it employs a lot of classic, like, propaganda techniques that I noticed. Like, it does a lot of things where it'll transition through montages that crossfade images over one another to relay information. So rather than having a character hop on a phone and say, "Hi, this is blah 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 with British intelligence," or whatever, German intelligence in this case, they will do things like a soldier speaking on a landline and he's just talking with command, telling them information, and it'll crossfade the flag of his country over that image.
Yeah.
So that you connect in your mind, oh, this guy's a German soldier. He's telling his superiors the information he just learned. It does a lot of things like that. that I thought it was kind of cool. It's as a kid, I probably never would have picked up on that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Now I do because I watch so many fucking movies and I know these ideas.
Yeah.
And it, I don't know, I think it's cool that propaganda film making had its place, but it bled into narrative filmmaking a little bit here and there.
Yep.
I mean, the most recent stuff I can cite that does that is your most hated movie of all time, Starship Troopers. That's literally straight German propaganda type of stuff put in a sci-fi setting.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting to see it used in a different way, I think. But yeah, I don't have a ton more beyond that.
All right, so let's close this out then.
Moving into closing questions.
Yes, sir.
Did you have any favorites?
There was one line that Madeline says. Or no, there's one line that Lupta says to Carl. Carl Van Marowitz. I'm going to back it up. I do have one favorite line. It's Lupta, the Brazilian girl, says to Van Marowitz, as he's eyeing Madeline, kind of like, oh, she's beautiful. She goes, Carl, I have everything I want. Have you? So she knows that his eye is wandering, and which is funny because she met him the night before, and he took her shopping just so he could get closer to Madeline. And I was like, oh, look, ladies are still being used. Back then, they still use this technique now. But yeah, that one. And I think there was another moment where when she was being presented with the Medal of Honor and she says, Your Excellency, K125 was a woman, wasn't she? And he says, yes, she was a postal worker. And he's like, women, like at that point, I understood the scene as being like women were being used because they weren't expected. But when they're caught, it's devastating because that's a young woman's life that was taken because she wanted to serve her country. Young men were expected to serve their country, but when a young woman wanted to serve their country, it was devastating. And I'm like, props to those women who did it. Sucks that they were caught or, they were killed, but props to those women for standing up. They're braver than me. I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
Physically or, mentally. What about you? Any favorites?
There were only two moments in the movie that, one I straight up found hilarious, and the other was kind of just a very telling of the time kind of a thing, so I noted it. The one that made me laugh was I can't remember his actual name in the movie. The guy, Van
Marowitz?
Yeah, Van Marowitz.
Yeah.
He walks into the room all sternly, and then everybody's sitting around. There's a bunch of people sitting around a table, and he closes the door quietly behind them. They all look at him silently.
Traitor!
And all at once, they all just go, Get out of here!
Get out of here! Get out of here! Traitor! Get out of here! I can hear Andrew go, Go out of here!
I was dying. It was so fucking funny.
And then somebody stands up and goes, this is the head of the intelligence. And they all shut up, stand up, and go, are we gonna die? Excuse me.
The other moment was where we transition into the Cherry Orchard bar.
Okay.
And it starts on the sign and it just does this slow tracking shot across the room. And you got a bunch of people drinking in the foreground, and there's the stage performers far in the background. But
they just can't change.
I found it so telling of the time that this pan is happening, and it is so hard to see the actual stage performance in the distance because the noxious cloud of smoke from cigars and cigarettes is just lingering in the air. I was like, oh my god, it's terrible.
Do you remember when we were kids where they had a smoking and a non-smoking section?
I do.
And you think about it, that was less than 20 or 30 years ago. I remember they stopped letting people smoke around the early 2000s in places.
Yeah, and there was it never made any sense to me to have a smoking and non-smoking section.
Yeah, you're still going to get the smoke in the non-smoking section.
You're not that far apart.
Yeah.
Like, you go into a Denny's, and there would be smoking on this side, but non-smoking on this side. The place is like 20 feet long.
You know where you can still smell it, even though I know they've cleaned it up? Is a restaurant very close to us.
What's that?
Greg's.
Yeah?
So they have the new section where they built the tavern, which is the newer tavern, which is the high tops, where we've gone with coworkers and friends to have dinner. But if you go into the section where they sell the pies, and it smells like old people and just stale cigars to me. That smell, like, even though I know that they closed that place down, they cleaned it up, they replaced like sections, it's just still there. And I love when I go with my friends, we'll grab like dinner after work sometimes. The food is terrible. I'm really sorry. If anybody likes Greg's, I apologize, but the only thing good is the pickles, homemade pickles, and the fries with cheese and bacon. You can't do wrong with fries and cheese and bacon. But, like, you walk into the tavern part, and we always say we want to eat in the tavern because one of our friends has, like, really bad breathing problems. She goes into that section, and she's like, I can't fucking breathe in here. I can't do it. This is bad. And I just laugh because I'm like, it has been almost 30 years they've cleaned this. And that lingering smell.
They would have to strip out the wallpaper and fucking everything.
Like, it's in our apartment, too. You ever notice the bathroom? Like, the person previous to when you moved in, they were a smoker.
Yeah.
You can still see the bathroom walls bleed yellow sometimes. I've cleaned that. You've watched me. I've cleaned that room with bleach.
You and me both. We've tried to clean this place, and it still happens.
Sometimes, like, if you're not paying attention, like, I'll notice some of the walls, like, it gets very dusty.
It's actually happening right there by the bed.
Yeah, right by the bed. There's this line of, like, just yellow. And we clean. Like, we're not dirty people. We
clean the fuck out of it, and it just keeps coming back.
I cannot wait to have our own home where I can have a hypoallergenic filter system and a vacuum built into the wall. So I don't have to worry about this. I'm about ready to build my own Home Depot shed so I have my own house. But
would you make this film today?
No. Leave this one where it is. People have remade stuff like this. Espionage films are a dime a dozen.
They're a lot more frequent, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, who's gonna be Vivian Lee? I mean, she's the best part of this fucking movie. Sorry.
I don't know, like, I think this is one that could probably be updated. I don't really necessarily want to see it, though.
Yeah, but what would you update it to today? Would you update it current events, or would you keep it in the World Wars?
You would just do the same time period. You make it a period piece, but it's
purely because of the information sewn into the lace of the gowns.
Well, yeah.
Purely for that reason.
I think it could be done pretty well today. I don't see a need for it.
Yeah, no.
Would you call this mainstream exploitation or other?
I mean, for the time, I would call this mainstream other because it's an espionage. This is not a grindhouse film. Although because of the age, it probably would have been played in certain grindhouses.
I mean, this release of it alone, like, it's
a double feature.
We have a double bill tape.
Yeah.
Like, it's two movies in a pack, like, that would have been played probably back to back.
Yeah. You've got two movies that are a little over an hour each, so this would be great. You'd place the news in the middle of it, current events and shit, and that's how they would play. So I honestly, this is a grindhouse-like kind of movie, but I believe this is an other.
All right. Do you have anything else you want to say about Dark Journey?
I'm hoping that I can do other black and white films, but I wanted to, for the beginning of this year, play it safe with a nice simple black and white movie. We gonna get weirder, folks. Oh, I'm diving deep into our archive. We're going deep.
All right, I think that brings this episode to a close, but don't go anywhere just yet. Please stay tuned for the coming attractions.
Carol Joe is back. Jerry waited 2 long years. Now it's time to make a life for themselves. He's an honest trucker who won't make deals.
The mean, I don't haul that stuff, I don't drive, huh?
That's right. Just keep your mouth shut and do as you're told.
But it gets tougher for both of them.
I'm pregnant, Carol Joe. And I've been thinking I wish I weren't.
They force him to fight back, their way.
And next time you just might not be so lucky.
Get!
But he won't quit.
Get up!
No matter what.
You're about to walk off a cliff, boy.
He's only gonna get you dead, man.
They got the muscle. They own the law.
You're under arrest for the murder of Dwayne Howard.
They terrify his wife.
Take the deal and let's get the hell away from here.
He's a working man who's had enough.
Hey, Bitty Dog, you know who this is. You call him and tell him I'm coming here.
Ride with Carol Joe on a trip you'll never forget.
So, I've heard of this phrase, white line fever, but I've never heard of this movie. The fuck are we about to watch?
This is a action thriller from the mid 70s. It's this is definitely one that's a lot of people consider to be one of those great car movies.
Oh, okay.
So it's up there when you think of things like Gone in 60 Seconds, not the Nicolas Cage one, the original Gone in 60 Seconds. It's up there with things like Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, and Vanishing Point.
Dirty, Crazy, fucking Mary? What?
Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. That's a movie from 1974.
All right, these are movies I have never heard of, except for Gone in 60 Seconds.
They're very prominent, road movies, movies that take place in a car.
Like Mad Max?
Mad Max is a good example.
Okay.
That's also a post-apocalyptic road movie.
I've never seen that one either.
But this one has to do with truckers.
Oh, good.
Which is a little bit different, but it's a very popular, high-speed kind of action movie.
We're watching Speed? What?
No.
Oh.
Maybe eventually, but not now.
That's mainstream.
This is a movie that it took me a very long time to finally own. Always wanted to, and I got a really good release, but we're going to talk about that more next week.
Yep. All right. Well, let's get this show on the road then.
All right, guys. If you want to keep up on everything that we're doing, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Grindhouse Podcast. We're on Twitter at Grindhouse Cast. You can find us on Discord, where you can chat with Leah about this week's film or any of the films that we previously covered. We'd love it if you suggested us some movies that you'd maybe like to hear us talk about. All the links for everything are going to be down in the show notes. Listen to us first thing every Monday morning. Give us a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your morning fix. If you like what we're doing and you want to show this show some support, you can subscribe to us over on Patreon or directly through Acast, where you can get yourself access to ad-free listening or unlock some fun, exclusive bonus content just for our loving supporters. Until next week, I'm Shawn.
I'm Leah.
Thank you for listening, and keep watching.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. My throat is killing me.
shocking nature of many scenes in this film, it is definitely not recommended for the squeamish.